Thank you for tuning into BQ Prime. I'm your host Vikas Srivastava. Where we are standing today is India's largest and first liquefied natural gas terminal on the east coast of the country. This is Adani Total's Dhamra LNG Terminal. This terminal boasts of a depth of 18.5 meters, which means that any large LNG vessel can be berthed on this terminal. It also has a natural breakwater, which means that it is protected from many harsh weather conditions like high tide or large storm currents. This terminal right now is catering to the customers on the east coast and expects to reach its peak capacity of 6.5 million tons per annum by 2024, when the India's national grid will be full up and running. We have with us today Mr. S.P. Singh, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Adani Total's owned Dhamra LNG Terminal. Welcome to BQ Prime, Mr. S.P. Singh.
Thank you, Vikas, and thank you for making the trek to Dhamra. It's not the most accessible part of the country, so I really appreciate you being here with your crew.
No, it's our pleasure also, sir. And first of all, I would like you to explain to our viewers why this entire location has been selected and what is the purpose of selecting Dhamra as a location for LNG. So the significance of Dhamra and LNG, if you can explain to our viewers.
Yeah, of course. Because Dhamra is, as you've already said, it is a very strategic location from a geographical perspective because it has a natural breakwater which we can see right behind us in the form of Kanika Island, and which gives it natural protection. It is also located very, very close by to markets such as Bangladesh and other markets internationally, which gives it a very geopolitically strategic advantage. And finally, it is within the precincts of Dhamra Port. So Dhamra Port is a all-weather multi-cargo deep draft port. We've got world-class dredging operations here. We've got world-class tugs and other marine infrastructure, which are critical to the safe and successful and efficient operations of LNG. So it is with that intent in mind that Dhamra LNG site, which is here, was considered and selected and finally developed. And it is also because of these conditions that the Urja Ganga pipeline, which is India's national gas grid, has been extended all the way from Jagdishpur to now come to connect Dhamra. It is also being connected to the northeastern states and also go down south. So Dhamra is now a delivery point, a very important linchpin, a supply source of gas to the entire nation. So it is these factors that have contributed to Dhamra becoming an emerging hub for gas in the eastern part of the country.
Right. So today one of the most emerging thing is, like, we are talking about green transition. Government's entire focus is shifting towards green. We are talking about EVs, we are talking about green hydrogen. The green hydrogen policy is also now up there, So amidst all this, where do you see LNG standing? We talk about LNG as a clean fuel. We talk about LNG as a transition fuel. So how long this transition would continue? Because we also see that government is saying that, we are planning to increase the mix of natural gas in the entire energy mix to up to 15% by 2030, which means it's not going to subside anytime soon, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So where exactly we see LNG as a alternative fuel in the entire mix of energy?
Well, thank you, Vikas, for the question. I think I want to use every platform I get to address and be an advocate for gas, in particular LNG. You see, as you correctly said, LNG is referred to as a transition fuel, but my humble submission is that if the transition is going to last for 30 years or more, we cannot just think of it as a transition which is going to fade away anytime soon. We've got to make long-term commitments to really help the growth of natural gas penetration in India's primary energy mix. At this point in time, India's share of natural gas is less than 6%, about 6%. The Honorable Prime Minister has, with a view to meeting our net zero targets of 2070, our greening targets, there is an ambition to grow the share of natural gas to 15%. India imports half its natural gas consumption in the form of LNG. So therefore, LNG, unless and until we grow LNG's penetration and LNG's consumption in this country, there is no way we are ever going to hit the 15% target or even get close to meeting our net zero targets that we've set ourselves. LNG is the cleanest burning fossil fuel. It is affordable compared to the liquid fuels it hopes to substitute. And therefore, my vision for LNG in the country, and Dhamra is part of that vision, is to see more and more users committing long term to buying LNG. Because unless you structurally adjust your energy needs to burning LNG on a long term basis, you'll always be reliant on the spot market. On a pricing basis, the spot market in LNG sees a lot of volatility, as we have seen in the last 18 months because of what happened between Russia and Ukraine. So, if we remain reliant on the spot market, we're always going to fall short, I feel, in our ambition of greening our energy mix, because we'll find LNG to be more expensive, because that's what the spot market does normally. On a long-term basis, you have clearly a big cost advantage. You can easily buy LNG today at a significant discount to liquid fuels, saving the country billions of dollars. And I therefore believe that infrastructure like what we've created here in Dhamra actually helps us in being able to move the country away from liquid fuels to some extent towards cleaner, more affordable fuels like LNG, thereby saving foreign exchange and helping us meet our net zero targets. So in summary, I think LNG has a very pivotal role to play in our country's food security in the form of fertilizer production, industrial growth in the form of manufacturing of heavy industry like steel, etc., cooking gas. All of this, the growth or sustainable growth of all of these areas goes through LNG. Therefore, my vision is to see LNG becoming a much more fundamental, long-term fuel that is used regularly, increasingly in a more diverse way in India's energy mix.
Right, and also more acceptable basically.
It is definitely more acceptable because, as I mentioned, it is the cleanest burning fossil fuel. And whilst we have ambitions to move towards renewable energy, green hydrogen, LNG is actually a complementary set of green hydrogen, because you can use LNG infrastructure to even bring in small quantities of green hydrogen initially. And renewable energy, by the time it scales up and it finds application in all the sectors that burn fossil fuels, we are talking of many decades. It's not going to happen overnight. So in that time, LNG will continue to play a very fundamental role, and we must not shy away from that. We have to embrace it to actually fully reap the benefits of what it has to offer.
Could be the reason why government has also chosen 2070 as the target for net zero and net zero emission.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that 2070 and it's not 2030 is just a reflection of the enormous effort and enormous investment that is required in our country's infrastructure to get there.
One thing that I wanted to ask, two things on on this. One is, like you also told, I think we need almost 40 to 50 MTPA of additional capacity to be added for LNG in the country if we have to meet that requirement of 15% of energy mix of natural gas. And second, what is the kind of investment that will be required if we have to achieve that kind of target?
Look, it's difficult to provide an exact number, but I would say some estimates are order of magnitude of about $15 billion of investment is required in just creating more LNG infrastructure to actually reap the benefits. But what you have to understand is that the payback on this infrastructure can be in a matter of a few years because of the significant savings to liquid fuel that you can lock in. So it's a very wise investment because we can free up more polluting fuels away from our energy mix and actually introduce LNG.
And also, I think you were talking about that many of these terminals, they don't really utilize the entire 100% of it, and many of them in Japan and other places, they keep it at 30%, and in situation like when the prices are very volatile, they can hedge that, and get the entire benefit in less than, say, 3 months, 4 months.
Absolutely. So thank you for reminding me. I think that's a critical point to talk about. You see, LNG storage and LNG capacity in India, so far we normally talk about it in terms of matching demand to capacity. So we say, okay, capacity is 100, for example, so demand is about maybe 80 or 90. So we look for very high utilization of our terminals. And that's normal in a capital constrained environment. But what we therefore miss out on is the ability to use storage and capacity strategically. So we are very then dependent on what the market is. We have to accept buying at whatever price there is because we don't have any flexibility of sourcing opportunistically. However, my feeling is that looking at the experience of Japan, Korea and some other markets, if LNG storage and capacity is thought of not just for a way to meet demand, but as a means to hedge against price volatility. In other words, think of it strategically. There is a lot of benefit commercially available to users. For example, in the last 12 to 18 months, I was doing my maths, and what is apparent is that you could have recovered the cost of one of these tanks in literally 5 cargoes if you had the ability to source that cargo opportunistically, rather than just be forced to accept it when you need it, just because you have no flexibility. So increasingly, I would say that trying to match capacity with demand is a bit too simplistic. If we really want to be looking at LNG as a fundamental part of our energy system, we should be prepared to invest in more terminals, in more storage, in more pipeline capacity, so that we are able to really reap the benefits of the flexibility that will offer us.
So, what the kind of capacity utilization right now we have at our port, and by when we expect this to go up to say peak capacity of 6.5 MTPA? Yeah. And also a little bit if you can talk about your future plans, if you plan to expand it further, kind of demand environment.
We will hope to achieve the rated capacity that we have signed up for by the end of 2024, when the grid is fully connected to some of the major demand centers. For example, some of IOCL's refineries are still not connected to the grid, and hence the offtake is not as high as it could have been, but we expect that to be corrected by about 2024 end. The current peak capacity of 6.5 MTPA is phase 1. This terminal can easily be expanded up to 10 MTPA. When we walk around the terminal, I'll show you, we have space for additional storage, additional vaporization, additional power, and then we have also further land available should we want to go beyond. My vision is that Dhamra will be to the east what Dahej is to the west in terms of LNG. It will be an LNG hub. It will cater to, it will be the largest terminal on the east, catering to demand, not just in the eastern sector, but also to the north and other parts of the country.
Okay. Now I would suggest that if you can take us to your tanks, which you, one part you said that it's almost can accommodate 2 Airbus.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to take you there. Let's go there.
Sure. Thanks. So it's much more brighter and sunny now, and we are back on top of the 2 tanks that we were talking about. Mr. Singh, you can take us through these specifications as well as talk about a little bit these large huge tanks that we see around.
Yeah, thanks, Vikas. Some fun facts for you, just to make it more relatable as to how big these tanks are, because it doesn't really, this perspective does not really do justice to the size of the tanks. Each of these tanks in itself is big enough to house 2 Airbus A380 aircraft, one on top of the other. So that's how big the inner diameter and height, etc. is. And in terms of the amount of energy that they can store, each of these tanks can actually, if you take the combined energy, LNG that can be stored in both of these tanks, you can meet all of Mumbai's power requirements for 15 days. Wow. If you were to consume all the electricity that is in Mumbai via LNG, for 15 days you could meet the power requirements of the city. That's how much energy is captured or is stored in just these 2 tanks. These 2 tanks are, like other tanks in India, are of full containment type. But what is interesting about these tanks is the size. They are amongst the biggest tanks that we have in the country today. And in terms of the overall design of Dhamra,
You can
Uh,
pan and show a little bit about, the kind of specifications that we have.
Yeah, you can definitely pan over. The kind of specifications that this terminal has been designed to are world class. LNG standards are very global and very rigid in terms of their adherence. I'm very proud to say that I'm part of an industry that has operated largely incident-free for the last 60 odd years, and it is not because not by coincidence. I think it is largely because companies like ours have adhered to and maintained very stringent standards and operational procedures, and Dhamra in that sense is really no different. There are a few other interesting aspects on Dhamra that I'd like to point out for your viewers. First and foremost, I would say gives me immense pride to say we have an excellent set of people. The reason why that's important is that in the eastern part of the country, this is the first LNG terminal. In the eastern part, there has largely not been a lot of industrial activity. And because of the standards that I just referred to in the LNG industry, I feel that the creation of this infrastructure in Orissa is going to be a magnet for talent, is going to act as a reservoir of expertise in terms of oil and gas infrastructure, and hopefully that will act as a magnet for other industrial developments who can actually use and learn from and imbibe the kind of expertise that we have developed here. And the second point that I think is very important for you to be aware of is the fact that this terminal has imbued the concept of Atman Nirbharta. For instance, this tank that you're standing on are the first tanks in the world that have been executed by an Indian EPCC contractor. So, in developing this through an Indian EPCC contractor, what we hope we have done is that we have enabled the creation of expertise of this contractor to be replicable on a global scale. Also, I would say that the pandemic was a very natural opportunity for us because there was such a lockdown, there was such a restriction on movement of personnel, etc. We were forced to do a lot of activities in-house and using Indian resources. So I think that was another sort of opportunity that we created of developing in-house or local skills, which have been quite helpful, hopefully, as we go forward in other developments. And the final point is that this terminal has used environmentally friendly design parameters. For example, we use ambient air for heating LNG. So you can see all these fans there, which actually use ambient air for vaporizing LNG. And there, as a result of that, you can see if you pan to the right, you will be able to see the huge amount of condensate water that we will be producing on a regular basis. So, we have made full use of the tropical environment we are in, and we use ambient air. And I think also from other aspects, there is an environmental consciousness built into pretty much everything that we do, whether it is in how we relate to the immediate land environment around us, in terms of effluent discharge, or in terms of the way we interact with the community. We're already engaging with the local villages, and under the aegis of the Adani Foundation, there are a number of community initiatives that we've already begun. So all in all, I think Dhamra is today on the world LNG map. It is a takeoff point on the eastern border of the country for gas to be imported in the form of LNG and then to be transported across the country. If I request you to just pan to that yellow structure over there, you'll be able to see that is about less than 2 kilometers from where we are. So it's about 1.5 kilometers from our terminal fence. And that is the metering station of GAIL. So our gas from this terminal goes to that point from where the national grid takes off. So it is that proximate. So, gas infrastructure is not something that you see. Most of it is not visible, but it is there. It is snaking through all these fields out there. And essentially, it is a very key piece of the transition story for India. And I'm very glad, Vikas, that you could come here today, because I think seeing is believing. You know, it's a remote part of the country, and only through seeing the kind of infrastructure that we've created can you really appreciate how this is contributing to the growth story of India, to the greening of India's energy needs.
One thing I would like to ask, there is one very interesting thing which is coming up, and we saw it here also. You have these trucks which come up over here and which will now be carrying or transporting LNG from one place to another. So we have seen how China has taken lead in this field. And another is that these trucks will also be running on the same fuel. So can you talk a little bit on that?
Oh, yes.
What kind of prospect and scope we see on it?
Yeah, frankly, it's a bit frustrating for me to note, 10 years ago, India and China both had 0 trucks running on LNG. Today, China has over 1 million trucks that run on LNG. India, for a variety of reasons, has still not warmed up to the fact of running on LNG. Essentially, there is a golden quadrilateral in India, which connects Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai and Kolkata. And essentially, the heavy duty trucks that ply on these highways are the most suited to switch to LNG. So there's a lot of work going on with OEMs, with retail outlet providers and with fleet owners to actually convert to LNG. And again, like I mentioned earlier, there are significant cost savings as a result of that. And what I'm hoping is that with the support of the government and with the participation of various stakeholders, we will see a lot of usage of LNG as a road transport fuel, and Dhamra, with its truck loading bays, is very ideally suited to supply LNG to them in this part of the country. LNG in small scale, that's also what the trucks can do, is they can supply LNG as a fuel, is very useful to supply to those industries that are not yet connected to the gas grid. So there are a number of industries where the gas grid has simply not reached. And those customers can now also, because we have LNG via trucks available, can also benefit from this environmentally friendly fuel. Finally, this truck loading bay is also going to play a part in the provision of LNG as a bunker fuel. So, all ports in the country are also slowly moving towards using greener fuels. And Dhamra is no exception. And over a period of time, we actually expect that fuel from this truck loading bay will also find its way into making LNG available as a bunker fuel.
Thank you very much, sir, for taking out time and talking to us. It was our pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Vikas. Thanks so much for coming over.